Akinin was a QuestBridge alum from U Chicago. Do we have any people from U Chicago in the room? David is a developer entrepreneur. So in 2014, he moved to Namibia, and he founded Akinin Developments, which builds privately funded affordable housing across Africa. Before that, he was a banker in New York. He also spent some time with Google and did several other impressive things before that. But what I think is the most impressive thing about him is, well, actually, there are two things. One is he is fluent in 6 languages, which I think is amazing considering that I still struggle to find the right words in English sometimes. And 2, he owns a zebra. I've never met anybody in my life who owns a zebra, and I don't think I would meet anybody else in my life who owns a zebra, so we can take that for what it's worth. So please join me in giving a really warm welcome to David as he shares his story with us this evening.
Buenas noches. Reed Hoffman backstage told me you guys were in your underwear, but I don't think so. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, and I'd like to take, I know you guys have been clapping all day, but I haven't been in a room where we were all together and we took 1 second to just clap for Anna, Michael, and the entire QuestBridge team, because they not only put together an amazing conference for all of us to get together, but also to get us where we are today in life. So if you can join me in that, I think it's great. Production guy backstage asked me if I'm a walker, so I'll warn him again. I don't know who the camera guy is, but I am a walker. I want to start with this. I think there comes a time in our lives where we should make inventory of our story. I happen to be, right now, in a time of my life where I'm asking myself questions about what I want to do next. I keep hearing everywhere, what are you doing in the next 5 years? What are you doing in the next 10 years? I walk away from these conversations at this conference because that's what my speech is about. I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to be in the next 5 years tonight. You know, small businesses, all the time, shut down on a weekend at the end of the month and they say, let's do inventory. Let's find out how much we have left, what we've sold, and how much we still need to sell to make ends meet. But oftentimes, we don't do that for ourselves. We don't sit around and make inventory of our own lives. Maybe you look at your bank account or you check around whether you have enough degrees, but do you count your stories? So I found very often, maybe Reed is a good example, that when you share your story or when people know your story, others get some inspiration. But have we used our story to inspire our own selves? So tonight, I'm going to tell myself my story, and I ask you to share it also with you guys. And in hoping to do so, I'll find some answers to chart my path. I grew up in Venezuela, one of 4 brothers. My dad, who's actually in the room, is Spanish. And my mom is Moroccan. When I was 9 years old, I remember my dad dropped me off at a store. He was a vice president of a big chain of business and retail. And he told the manager, listen, if my son doesn't sell a fridge, don't call me to pick him up. And he left. Now, I didn't sell a fridge and my dad picked me up. I'm here today. But what I remember from my childhood is that we were challenged, we were taught the right values, but we were always put on the spot. 2 years later, my brothers and I were kidnapped at gunpoint in our house. Our life changed forever. We moved to the United States. It was amazing for us. It was an adventure. For my parents, it was the most difficult thing they ever did. They left everything behind, even themselves. When we got to the United States, I remember coming back home and crying, telling my father 0045382. That was my number, my ID number, in a high school of 4,000 people in Miami. He found it hilarious. He didn't think there was a problem. He had the confidence of the final result. He knew what life is about. You'll figure it out. Me, I was afraid. I was just a number like many of us in this room. I worked for my father day and night. He actually opened up a small furniture business. My brothers and I, what he probably thought was a struggle, lived in the 4 of us in 1 bedroom. We loved it. And it was a little bit of fighting sometimes. But I worked with him in this business he opened. And he gave me the power at 13, 14 years old to do accounting, to do all sorts of things. And one day, a guy that I had warned him, I thought was trying to start a competition, came into the store and told us that he was opening a competition. And my dad said, 1 second, do you know my son is a web designer? He can make you a website. Without a website, he will never be successful in business. I was 14 years old, I had no idea how to make a website. The guy leaves, I told my dad, are you nuts? He said, well, you wanted to make some money off this guy, this is your chance. So I made him a website, and he referred me to like 2, 3 more people to make websites. And I became a web designer at like 14. And then I had this passion that was instilled in me by a class about wanting to do something in Africa, and I told everyone I was going to send shoes to Africa. Lesson number 1 in my life, if you want to do something, tell people about it, then you're accountable. I made a website, that was the biggest issue, I told everyone about it. And we collected like 6,000 pairs of shoes with the friends that I started this, and later on we shipped it all to Western Africa. So, because of that and some good grades, and maybe part of the real struggle that I had gone through, I was fortunate enough to come across this organization you guys might have heard of called QuestBridge. And I got a scholarship to go to the University of Chicago. First week in school, I'm sitting in biology class, I hated it, and I get an email, ping, from Career Services, Google's hosting a coffee chat. I thought, I'm making websites, I should go talk to Google about this like advertising thing. And I show up, and I was dressed something like this, everyone's wearing a suit, and the recruiter comes in the room and says, you, in the casual clothes, you're very googly, and 2 of your suits come in the door. So we had a group interview, she asked people like, what do you guys know of Google? And one guy says it's a non-profit, another guy says it's a social enterprise. This is 2009, or 2008. And I said, actually, it's the biggest marketing company. She said, how do you know that? And I said, well, I use it for advertising. And she said, nice. Like in the past couple of years in college? I said, no, I'm a freshman. She goes, this is an interview for senior people graduating to work at Google. I thought this was a chat to talk to you about your products that suck. And she loved that. And she hired me to work at Google in my freshman year. And it was amazing. I started working there, and I started learning a lot, but I still had this passion that I wanted to do something, go into a market and create something and have impact like many in this room. So I came across an alum from my university when I was studying abroad in Europe, and he told me, if you want to do something impactful in your life, learn how money works. Now this was good advice for me, it might not be good advice for everyone. But find people across life who will give you advice and learn how to pick up on it. Some of it is really good, some of it might not be. But what you do with it is what really matters. So I quit Google, and I went to work at Credit Suisse. Now how I got there is the name of 2 organizations I really recommend. Anyone who's still in college writes them down. MLT and SEO. If you have questions about it, come and see me later. But these are amazing organizations that got me in. And then I realized I hated what I was doing that summer. And I wanted to move into mergers and acquisitions, which I knew nothing about. And I pondered on how to do it. And that took me back to my time in college, where my dad called me once and said, hey, Bill Gates is speaking at your school. And I said, wow, how do you know? Because I found it on the internet. I said, cool. He goes, cool, I need you to give him a letter. I said, yeah, I don't think so, man. I've got like a midterm in 2 days. Like, I don't think I can hang out with Bill Gates later this afternoon. So he says, I'm sending it to your email. Go print it in the library. I said, look, I don't think I can give Bill Gates a letter. He goes, when have I asked you for a favor? I don't know how many of your parents have done that to you, but yeah, I went to print the letter. And I showed up to a room like this big, and I raised my hand for the first question, and I gave Bill Gates that letter. They communicated a couple of times, so I thought if my father could get to Bill Gates, well, I should be able to get to like someone at Credit Suisse to change me into mergers and acquisitions. And I went to a conference the size of this, where the CEO of Credit Suisse was speaking, and I ran up to the stage at the end and said, hey, I've got a letter for you. And he took it. And everyone had rejected me because I knew no accounting, I was entrepreneurial, and I was a tech guy at 21, right? But the CEO read the letter and invited me back and said, come on and join us in the mergers and acquisitions team. I moved to New York when I graduated college, and I started working for Credit Suisse. I sucked. I spent till 2, 3 in the morning being friends with this Russian kid who actually was very good, who taught me how to do my work, so in the day I looked like I knew what I was doing. But I learned a ton, and I started making money, which is really important too. You have to worry about yourself. There's a few things, like you should not lose sight of the impact you want to have and the things you want to do, but you should also not forget that you have responsibilities to yourself to get there. And there's ways to get there. So I took every one of my vacations to Africa. I went to Nigeria, I went to Angola, I went to Namibia. During my Nigeria vacation, which my boss thought it was not a vacation, I found out I had a voice. The same voice I had in my father's business when I was 13 that I thought was long lost. I found out I could walk into meetings and speak to people and they actually cared what I had to say. So eventually I walked up to my boss and I told him, I quit. I'm moving to Nigeria, but I'm not giving you the letter yet. I want to know what I should write on it. And he goes, well, why don't you consider moving to Australia? I said, what am I going to do in Australia? I don't speak Australian. He goes, you speak English. I said, I understand, but like I've got nothing to add. I'm like Latino, I'm going to move to Australia, there's nothing there, you know? So he said, well, give me a chance. And this takes me to something really important, which is speak up. You know, how many of us are in a room sometimes with a passion, with an interest, with a concern, and we don't raise our voice. We don't speak about what we like. How many people in your office actually know what are the top 5 things you care about? But they work with you all day and they have these huge expectations from you. I spoke up. I told everyone, I'm moving to Africa with the bank or without the bank. But instead, my boss told me, listen, we don't have an Africa office, but we'd love to send you to Chile to open the Credit Suisse office there. I was 23, the worst analyst at the bank. And now I was offered to move to Chile, to go open the office there, and I took it in a heartbeat. I moved to Chile for 8 months. I had an amazing opportunity to learn how to be a banker. And I realized over time that I had gained enough skills. I had learned how money works, enough to be able to pursue what I wanted to do. So I called up that guy who taught me how money works, and I said, hey, I think I know a few things. You want to meet me in Namibia? Now here's something about Namibia, which I think is worth a plug. I was born March 26, 1990. Namibia was born on March 21st, 5 days before me. It had been a victim of apartheid, and previously it had been colonized by the Germans. It had gone through so many calamities. But the worst part of it was that as a black person in your country, you couldn't own land until 1990. You couldn't own a home. You couldn't have access to electricity. You couldn't probably even get a good education. Things we think we were fighting in this country about much earlier were still not happening when I was born in these countries. And this was their country. Like, it wasn't that they moved there and somebody tried to change things for them. This was their home. So when I came to Namibia for the first time, I realized something amazing. Government had failed to create the supply of housing in an effective manner and had now incentivized the demand, which meant that they were going to subsidize the buyers to buy houses. And if they could do that, I thought that's a beautiful financeable product, because if you can build something that someone can buy that's being subsidized, they'll take it. So I thought I'll start a mortgage platform. And that failed. And then I moved to Namibia. I quit my job, I raised some money from this guy, I bought my first 3 plots of land, and we built a couple houses. Since then, the company grew, and we started building more houses. We built a team. You can't do anything without people. Lesson number 3. The team that we built was able to help us go into communities and digitalize. Before we enter anywhere, we actually go and survey everyone. We find out how many people work at the police stations, at the schools, at the clinics. Get it? Keep in mind that post-apartheid Namibia, the government had gone and built clinics, schools, all sorts of infrastructure, but not necessarily housing. So you have people actually making money in some of these towns that hadn't done it. About 2 years ago, this same guy who had lent me money, boom, showed me a surprise that he wanted me to merge and take my company somewhere else, which I thought was not great. And I had to make a big decision. Do I do something that is unethical and stay with this guy? Or do I actually lose everything I did and double down on something I really believe in? And I challenge you to always look for these ethics in your life that are guiding you, and never challenge them, never to put them aside when somebody is questioning. Not for money, and not for a better, more successful future. In the last 2 years, we've built more schools, more houses, more clinics, more solar projects than we did in the first 3. And our team's been amazing and successful. And now, what I started with at the beginning, it says here, please wrap up now. So now I'm wrapping up. I'm in a crossroad. A friend of mine called me and wants me to join his startup. I've been 5 years in Namibia building this company. And he wants me to join a startup in Latin America to help it expand because they're raising money on Series C. And I'm trying to weigh, do I continue doing what I'm doing and expanding? We're now actually in Zambia and Cameroon also, I forgot to mention that. Or do I take on a new challenge and try to find a sustainable way to leave my company running? And that leaves me with something interesting I heard not too long ago. I don't know how many of you have heard of the origin of the word pioneer, but we always think of a pioneer as someone who does something first. The word pioneer comes from the Middle French in the 1500s, of a foot soldier. A foot soldier is someone who actually digs trenches, someone who gets the work done, someone who maybe after somebody had explored that area before them, comes in and opens up the path for other peoples to come. As I think of charting my path and thinking of where I want to go, I want to be a pioneer. I want to continue being a pioneer. I want to continue digging trenches. I want to continue finding ways to, while protecting myself, creating routes for impact and success for me and my community. And I challenge all of you, even those of you who may be afraid to think of a pioneer as someone who has to be the first, to recognize that you're all pioneers in this room. QuestBridge recognized that early on for you. Grab onto that story and make sure that as you go forward, you encourage others to join you in the search of better pioneers. Thank you.